On May 19th, 2016, Shae Simmons began her drive home to Springfield, Missouri from Austin, Texas, after a mission trip in Guatemala. When she got in the car that morning, she had no idea her entire life was about to change.
I don't remember anything. I don't even remember the whole day of driving. The last thing I remember is calling my dad and saying, I'm going to get gas and I'm going to be on my way home, and him saying, okay, be careful.
Just kind of a normal day, normal evening, running after kids. Coming home, we were excited to see Shae because we hadn't seen her for months because she'd been gone and to Guatemala. So when we first heard about the accident, first of all, I had texted her. She didn't text me back. So I was not overly concerned because she was driving, but I waited a little while and I called her and she didn't answer. And I called her over the course of about an hour and a half, 2 hours. I called her several times and she didn't answer and she didn't call me back. So the mom instinct in me said, something's not right.
I was northbound and a semi was southbound, and it was a 2-lane highway that had like a grass median, and he made a left-hand turn in front of me and I didn't have time to stop, and I drove up underneath the end of his trailer, and it ripped the roof off my car because I drove underneath it, and then he kept driving, and so it pulled my car sideways until my car flipped, and my car flipped like 4 times, and then it landed upside down and slid like 80 yards without the roof on it.
The previous day, Shae's parents downloaded an app to locate her phone as she made her way home.
We actually looked up the location on Google Maps, and it was not a location she should be. It wasn't a gas station. It wasn't on a highway. It just didn't look like she should be there. So he walked out the door, I'm going to go find her. And I called the police department and said, basically, maybe this is a psycho mom incident, but I feel like something's not right. She's not answering her phone. She's driving by herself. I have her location, and I need somebody to go check on her.
Connie's instincts were correct. For over an hour, Shae fought for her life while emergency services struggled to rescue her.
I wrecked at like 7:10, and the ambulance or the helicopter wasn't even dispatched until like over an hour later. They had a really hard time getting me out of my car. Like, I was trapped for over an hour as well. And so I think that was the biggest thing, was just being trapped and them not being able to get me out, because my car was upside down and there was no roof on it, so they couldn't see me at all. Like, they could see me through a hole like this big, they said.
Shae's father, Dan, being a law enforcement officer, understood the severity of Shae's condition based on the action of first responders.
Initially, from the onset, whenever I spoke with the police officer and he would give only bare information, I knew that
and
he thought it was
I think
bad.
that comes from your job. I mean, he being an officer knows he's been in that situation. You don't want to be the one to tell the family the bad news. You tell them as little as possible. So I think he knew that from his own experience, where I didn't have any way to measure that, I guess.
And then also the neurosurgeon's statement on the night after the surgery, when I asked him if he could give us any idea about her prognosis or possibilities, and he just looked at me and said she had paint chips and debris embedded in her brain from the accident that I had to clean out.
Shae's injuries were vast and life-threatening.
I tore my meniscus, and I cut my patellar tendon in half, and I broke my ulna and my radius, which are the 2 bones in your arm, completely in half. And I shattered my cheekbones, my orbital sockets, my nose, and like all over my skull. I was so messed up that they did a brain surgery like through it without going and making another incision, because my skull was like collapsed, and so they did it through like the hole in my skull. And then I just had a really traumatic brain injury, and then after my surgeries, when I initially got there, I was just in a coma. I wasn't waking up, and I wasn't breathing on my own.
Her family still did not know the extent of her condition.
I didn't know how bad it was, but I could tell it was not like minor because my mom was crying. We didn't find out that she got life flighted until we were like halfway to Tulsa. She looked terrible. She didn't even look like herself. So that was kind of hard. And to see like my parents struggling with it was rough too.
The family stayed strong based on the enormous number of people who came to their aid in the time of need.
I was completely taken back by the support. Probably 10 people that were there before we got there that were just friends with her from Tulsa. So it started from the very beginning. And I mean, the first week she was in Tulsa, I think we lost count of people, but I would say easily a couple of hundred. Easily a couple hundred people. I mean, it was just a constant stream.
Despite the hundreds who arrived to show their love, Shae's life still hung in the balance.
At first, they were like, yeah, she's not going to make it through this. And then I made it through the surgeries and through the night. And so then they were getting more optimistic about me living. But I was paralyzed on the right side of my body for like 2 weeks. And so they were saying, you know, when she wakes up, if she wakes up, the chances of her being paralyzed forever and not being able to walk are really high. The chances of her not being able to talk or swallow are really high. And there's just a big chance that she'll never be able to walk or speak ever again. She'll just be wheelchair bound and pretty much like just not able to do anything. But then I just kind of was, all of a sudden I woke up from my coma and I just slowly started moving my right side. And then when I woke up, they were worried that, you know, like when they pulled the ventilator out and stuff, they were worried that I wasn't going to talk. And I guess they pulled it out and I was just like, I'm like talking like crazy. So they didn't have to worry about that anymore. And so just kind of everything, it just ended up being best case scenario.
Shae's father went to the junkyard to retrieve Shae's belongings from the wreckage. And what they were given was a symbol of even more support from their faith.
The guy handed him my Bible and said this was sitting in the passenger seat, which was weird because I put like my Bible and my journal and my computer in my backpack, and I zipped my backpack and put it in the back seat, and like I remember doing that. And so I don't know how it ended up next to me, but in the hospital my brother was, it was really bloody, there was blood on it, it was whatever. And so my brother was cleaning it for me, trying to like clean it up, and he opened it and there's a marker was in Job 5:18 was highlighted, and Job 5:18 says, "For he wounds, but he also binds up. He injures, but his hands also heal." And so that just kind of became like a big like inspiration for my family, like through the whole thing.
To me, how everything was so perfectly orchestrated, you know, that he included, you know, the first responders on. Not the first responders, the first people to drive up on the scene was an ER doctor, an ER nurse, a labor and delivery nurse, a paramedic. Those were all people that were on their way home from work that just happened to come up on the accident. Well, how more perfect how lucky can you be? So, you know, I think it just really drove home how I feel like God just kind of orchestrated everything just perfectly so that she could be here, you know.
Shae's story is a miracle, but her life is forever changed.
Biggest thing I'm struggling with is more of like an inner battle with like, okay, like I look different now. Like how am I going to cope with totally going from feeling fine about myself to all of a sudden like I have scars on my face and my head's half shaved from surgeries. You can see the fractures in my face just from me sitting here, and half of my face is still swollen, and it's just like getting back to being okay with that, I think, is something that I struggle with the most.
Throughout every test she faced, despite the odds, she triumphed.
It was really cool because there was like always an obstacle that they said this will probably happen, and it was cool to watch her just get over it again and again.
I mean, a lot of people don't know much about brain injuries, but it like really affects like your memory and your attention span and just a lot of stuff like that. So I'm not back in school yet. So I'm going back to school in January, which I'm excited about. And I'm driving again, and life is pretty much back to normal. I mean, it's hard because there's not really a normal after this. You know what I mean? Like everything is different. The way I feel is different. The way I look is different. The way I think is different. The way people treat me is different. The way my family treats me is different. So it's really hard to say that I'm back to normal because it's kind of a new normal.